Mr. Bergeron,
Here.
Ms. Owens,
Here.
Mr. Kuhn,
Here.
Ms. Giello,
Here.
Mayor Mamula.
Yes. Rick, agenda as presented?
Yes, no changes.
Rick, do you have anything to start us off with on the partner organizations presentations?
No, I'll just set the stage. So thank you all for being here and taking time. I know we have a lot of meetings scheduled and there's a lot going on, but what we want to do today is kind of complete the back half of the budget. And you'll see, obviously you've looked through the packet, you see what's included in there. It should be a quicker process than last week. A lot of these are kind of self-explanatory. They're their own funds, many of them. And so we have certainly less discretion in these funds of what we do with the dollars. And because of our time constraints last time, even though we discussed in the budget marketing for BTO and special projects, BHA and BCA, we wanted them to have a few minutes. So each of them is going to give you just a short overview of kind of remind you what they did to adapt in 2020 and then how they're going and proposing their approach into 2021. And then they'll certainly, if you have any questions of them. You have a presented dollar amount for both BHA and BTO, and BCA actually has a couple of options in their proposal based on some stuff, and Matt will refine that a little bit with you this morning. So please ask them any questions you have, and then at some point before we close out today, we'll just kind of confirm what those dollars are going to be for each of those parties.
Thanks, Rick. Hey, and I just want to say from the council, thank you to all the partner organizations for everything they've done over the last 8 months. I know it's been a struggle for everybody, and I truly appreciate the assistance we've gotten from everybody, and in particular for me, Lucy and Matt, and all the meetings that we've been at, and everything that's been going on. So thank you. So let's get started with the BTO. Good morning, Lucy.
Good morning, and thank you for the kind words, Eric. I'm so happy to be at the front of the back half. I don't exactly know what that means, but anyway, we just got in our, so thank you for giving us the time today. And I'm going to try to do this like really quickly so that you have, there's time for some Q&A if you have some for us. We just got the DMX reports, and I wanted to share that for September. We did close out September even with last year for occupancy with a slight uptick in ADR, and October is still looking about 30% up. It's low, 20% occupancy versus 15 last year. And looking forward 6 months is also favorable. Small numbers doesn't mean anything. It could change on a dime. But I wanted to share that with all of you first. The first thing I'd like to do is just reaffirm kind of 4 priorities that have been driving our decisions for the last 6 months. And they're important because this is what we're working with going forward. Number 1, we have been very conservative in our timing and targeting as far as marketing messages go. You might remember we didn't even start our marketing until July, after the July 4th weekend, because we wanted to understand how the drive traffic from Denver and Colorado Springs would be. We were late to market compared to a lot of our competitors, but we still believe that was the right decision. We are still excluding COVID hotspots in our message from our target messaging. And I think we're up to about 26 markets that at one time or another have been excluded. So we are very conservative in how we're deploying our out-of-state messaging. We are fully engaged in creating and dispersing safety messages and safety expectations for our guests. Those are changing all the time, and that's at the forefront for us moving forward, obviously. We are, number 3, we are pivoting quickly as circumstances change. When you read the assumptions that I have in our 2021 plan that just was in your packet 2 or 3 weeks ago, they're already changing with the COVID upticks. So we're just very flexible. And then the last one is we're using industry best practices and the best information. We're trading information with all of our CADMO partners. We're using destination analysts. You guys hear that all the time, but we're very focused outside of Breckenridge to understand if somebody's doing something better, we want to understand that and use it. So those priorities will continue. And we're getting a little better at it all the time, collectively as a community, I think. One thing to keep in mind as we go into the winter season, BTO does not steer the winter business the way we steer summer business. So please keep that in mind. We are prepared to lean in and do more in winter if we need to, but that will take a board decision because that's very much off of our core strategy. So just give us some time if it looks like we're going to need to do that. So that's our kind of operating priorities. Budget strategy for 21. We kept domestic marketing and PR pretty much whole going into 21. The marketing, the out-of-state messaging is really the lifeblood of our business, again, driving summer, fall for the most part. The big cuts were international, which we had already cut in 20, but we had a few accounts that were still funded last year that we did not spend. The big cut is $500,000 in events. We're taking out Oktoberfest, we're taking out our animation events. So that's a big change. That's a 58% cut in special events. And that's primarily due to the uncertainty in the marketplace and the fact that with the marketing and PR messaging, we know a little more immediately what those impacts are. We have increased resources for what I'm calling community building and messaging. So that is, our time and resources leaning in with the community updates, the resiliency committee, DMMO download 3 times a week, this local business surveys, et cetera, all those things. It's really important to us that we're focused on that community sentiment, business sentiment, as well as local, so that we're trying to, we want to make sure what we're doing, the community is comfortable with that as best we can understand that. And we'll take that information any way we can get it. So overall, our budget is down $1 million. It's about 22% when you include, the loss of other outside revenue. Oktoberfest is a big part of that, and some other sponsorships, as well as no retail in the Welcome Center. So the cut in the ask we have of the town is down 12%, but I just want to make sure you all know that we're taking an additional 10% out of other line items as well. So our overall cut is 22%. I'm not going to repeat what's in the executive summary plan, but just know that we are absolutely laser focused on the short term, looking at that day to day, looking at our business metrics and making adjustments as we go. At the same time, keeping an eye on those long-term DMP goals, quality of life, quality of place. So it's just a heightened level of awareness of both sides of that equation. We will be laser focused on out-of-state overnight business unless we collectively decide that you all want us to do something different. We're focused on summer, fall in this plan with support for winter. Safety, messaging, and execution is at the forefront, as is community engagement and responsiveness. So in closing, just please know that we treat this budget as if it were our own business. We're looking at it not purely on an ROI basis as a pure corporate might, but we are very much looking at that ROI balanced with the responsible destination management. And that really is behind all of our spending decisions. And we try to be as transparent with that as possible. And I'll just close with, we are very honored and very grateful that you all trust us to do this important work. So thank you for the consideration.
Thanks, Lucy. Questions? Aaron?
Lucy, given the recent cuts or the changes that Vail Resorts has made, how do you see that affecting their marketing over the winter? And I know it's not your entity, but do you have any ideas or have you heard anything?
We haven't heard anything, but I think they have, I know that Vail Resorts just has incredible data resources and they can manage their business very carefully. So I think, again, they're doing, they will likely do what any good business is going to do and just get really laser focused on where they can get the return with their balance on guest service and, guest loyalty. They have that same two-sided equation to deal with. So I'm glad it's Vail Resorts up on the hill, quite frankly, because they're going to figure it out better than anybody.
Other questions?
Yeah, Lucy, anecdotally, it seems like we have gotten a different visitor this summer than we have summers past. Now, this could be off base, but it just seems you just see a lot more, let's say, on our trails, families and just a little bit more of an active visitor, and perhaps just coming here just to get away from their city where it might be a little bit more risky. Do you see that continuing? Because I don't think I don't know if we're gonna get as many of the hardcore skiers because of the uncertainty. So am I off base on that? Do you see a different visitor, maybe more of a family, maybe more of a telecommuter that's here on a semi-permanent basis?
Yeah. Well, we did cut our intercept research this summer, both from a financial standpoint, and it didn't make sense to have, walking up to people asking questions.
Right.
So we, I can't quantify it, but your observations, I agree with your observations. Keep in mind, we typically do just under 40% of our business has been family business, and that's been the case for a long time. And we probably have had a bit of an uptick for all the reasons that you cited, Jeffrey. I would expect that going forward. I think as long as there is this schooling from home, work from home opportunity, people are going to use that opportunity to travel and work and school from other places. And I think that helps us. It's helped us smooth out those weekend bumps. We still have the spikes, but they're not as dramatic perhaps as they might have been otherwise. So I think it will continue for a while. I don't think we're going to lose our hardcore skiers. What I know from the ski business is skiers and snowboarders are passionate and they will travel come hell or high water, so I think that business won't be hurt too much.
Hey, Eric, can I add something?
Yeah, Rick.
In relation to what Jeffrey asked in Lucy's comment, so CAST is getting ready to enter into a partnership with Northwest SCOG to engage a research into that new dynamic of what's moving into. They're looking at 6 resort counties, and Summit is one of those in the state of Colorado, with the increase in home sales and the telecommuter. And what does that mean for our communities, and how engaged are those people are going to be in the community? How much time do they plan to spend in the community, et cetera? So it'll be interesting to see what that research shows. So
That's great.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. And that engagement piece, like we have talked a couple times now, is super important. How can we engage these new homeowners to give back to the community, as quickly as possible in both time and money to some of our organizations like FERC and the Summit Foundation. So that needs to be an emphasis for us, I think.
Yeah.
Lucy, the one thing that I want to sort of mention, in your little note here in your executive summary, the Build Back Better, I think we all need to know that better is not necessarily more.
Exactly.
But I think towards the end of even last summer and into the winter before everything went off the tracks, a lot of us were talking about event fatigue. You know, a lot of us were talking about just general fatigue in the community of just too many people all the time. And I personally, and I don't know how the rest of the council feels, but what I don't want to do is go back to an event a week. I really don't think that's healthy for our community. I would like to be a little more laser focused on good events that are branded events, and not just, you know, a liquor event every weekend, a art show every weekend. I mean, at some point, I think we need to this is a good time for us to get our hands around, okay, who are we now? What are we going to become? This is a good time to stop what we were doing and do something different. So that's what I would like to see, you know, tourism come out of COVID for our town. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but
I think
Well,
a validation of that is that we had very few events this summer, yet the trailheads, the town, you know, all the other destinations that do impact the quality of life were crowded. So, I mean, it seems like we survived without events. So I guess I concur to a large part of that.
Well, and a lot of those events are not put on by the town, but they're SEPA approved. I wonder, and I know that there was this idea of having a blackout weekend before COVID. Perhaps this would be a good time to have, you know, a handful of blackout weekends of, you know, there are just no events. I don't know how overreaching that is into private businesses, but it could.
It's not overreaching at all, Erin. And we have, you know, there are no events in May. I mean, historically, nothing in May. There's nothing in October. So those were 2 months that, you know, have been blackout months. And I agree with the events. And I mean, you see the $500,000 cut in our events budget. So I think we're on the same page there, that what comes back has to be really thoughtful. And it's, you know, and events are for the community as well as for bringing people here. So if there's some that the community is not that into, you know, that's all going to be factored in. And we have talked in the BEC, you know, this is a topic in the BEC meetings as well. And I think going forward, you know, might be a different set of parameters that we use to consider. You know, we have moved from the can we do it to should we do it? And now there may be a higher bar for that should we do it thing. It's got to check a couple more boxes.
And
excellent.
with this change in behaviors, we might see that we don't need to do it. You know, I mean, we're seeing busy weekends when usually it isn't, and people are just tired of sameness, I think. And once these behaviors are created, like, oh, going to Breckenridge the first weekend of November, even though there isn't a lot, you know, even though the weather isn't great, it's still a great place to visit, you know, so.
One thing I would just encourage you all to keep in mind, and this is a similar conversation I know came up in the Frisco Council meeting as well, but it's critically important for Breckenridge to stay focused on the lodging numbers, because we can be busy with a lot of people who are not spending any money in the community. And that is maybe not going to be good for the long haul. So I think, you know, in terms of our focus, I keep talking about the laser focus on out-of-state destination. We need to keep our eye on that ball. And we don't know, I couldn't tell you who's on the trails. I don't know if that's how much of that's destination guests or how many people drive in for the day. And it's one of the things that we'll learn a lot about this winter. A lot of the new activities and things that we're looking at, they're non-revenue activities, which is okay for, you know, guest animation and stuff like that. But we also need to keep the economic flywheel turning. So our focus is always going to be on that destination. And I would encourage you all to, you know, I'll remind you all the time, but that's really what matters. So I wish I knew, Jeffrey, who was on the trail, what percent was an out-of-state guest versus locals or people driving in for the afternoon. But that's just something to keep in mind.
You know what, I'll make one more observation on that, and things could change totally. Hopefully they will change totally in 12, 18 months. I think that the locals feel more of an impact on our trail system, on our trail system mostly, because now that is the respite that we all seek to, you know, during these wacky times. So maybe if our normal lives were normal, during the 5 days during the midweek, when we finally want to take a ride, take a run, take a hike, and then the trailheads are packed, would be more accepting. But now, what I'm hearing in the community, that, so I think our patience is thin. So a lot of this, I think, is a result of the circumstance that we're all going through, these
Right.
wacky times. So time will tell. And personally, I have faith in you guys are reacting, and we'll figure it out together.
Great.
I was
Thank
going to bring this up under other matters, but Lucy and Eric and I spoke on it this morning a little bit before everybody got on, but it really ties into maintaining harmony, quality of place, quality of life. I had 3 phone calls this weekend from longtime locals, 30+ year locals, and 2 of them were about short-term rentals in their neighborhood. And these are nice neighborhoods, $1 million+ homes. Well, I guess everything is now, but and these locals are they're at their wits' end because they think that short-term rentals are ruining their neighborhoods and their quality of life. People parking in their driveways. The other phone call was about, hey, what you guys are doing to town is great for business, but it's not good for locals.
Yeah.
All part of the same conversation.
Yeah.
None of them had any answers other than, you guys need to do something about this. And
Yeah. But and there again, just to play the devil's advocate, I would say that yes, if we had less people here this summer, it perhaps would be a better quality of life for those of us that are going wacky. But on the other side, there'd probably be small businesses that could be in peril. So, I mean, like I say, I think.
Yeah, I thought Lucy said it really well. We need to really pay attention to who the guest is. And, we need to pay attention to businesses that are focused on Front Range business. I mean, the reality is the Front Range has exploded, and that's changing our guest a lot.
Yeah.
And for the BTO to focus on state is huge. We, with events, as we reinvent ourselves, we have an opportunity to reinvent ourselves now. And we need to take a really hard look at events. And I think that should include working with the liquor board to try to get our head around these private events that almost always tend to have liquor involved, because, our the event structure and all of that is really about the public events or events on our property, but the ones on the private property have huge impacts on us as well. So, I really support those efforts. And and then there's other ways to animate, that really would benefit our local community as much as our destination guest. And, BCA, BHA, I mean, these partner organizations are great examples of it. So, maybe take a hard look at those liquor events on private property, which is tricky.
Well, and one of the things I think we're going to see, the people that have found Breckenridge over the last 6 months now, they're not just never going to come back now once COVID's over. They have become, longtime fans now, because the environment's been safe. They feel great on the trails. We have an amazing trail system. We have an amazing town with stuff to do, even during this weird time. And we have just created a new whole group of people that are going to be coming here, I think, from the Front Range more permanently. We're going to have to figure that one out too. So Carol, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, piggyback on your point, Eric and Jeffrey, just building back better. Lucy, I was so happy to see that, the emphasis on that and being clear with our guests, expectations for everything short-term pandemic safety to long-term just community values and backcountry trail etiquette. I think that is a great emphasis. Overall, I think the BTO has done a great job pivoting focus during the pandemic to really be a community resource, focusing efforts even more so there. So I'm excited to see how we'll build back better, focus on more high value guests, and work with the community to see what works with the community.
I think, Carol, that is going to be a little bit of the Build Back Better part is going to be, like I say, building the bridge as we walk on it. You know, we'll figure it out as we go.
Yeah.
Hey, Lucy, I wondered, I really liked that spreadsheet that you were making. I think it was like a year ago now, but it was evaluating all the current events and some of the
Yeah.
ones that we've done in the past. Are you guys going to continue doing that
Yeah,
and share
yeah.
that with us?
That's a core part of, you know, what we do in the BEC. So not just BTO events, but we try to do that for all the events. And absolutely, that's, you know, we use that when we're looking at our, you know, what we're going to do for the next year. So,
Great.
yeah.
I
Mhm.
think that's a really good strategic way to look at it. It certainly helps me.
Great. Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments, gang?
Hey,
Lucy.
just one more, Lucy. Thank you, to Brett, to your team. I'm going to piggyback on what Carol said. Is building back better is the way to go. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all.
Thanks
For
for
the-
everything, Lucy.
All right.
Okay, we have Heritage next.
If you guys take this much time with each of them, we're gonna be here all day. I just want to tell you.
All right, that was just for Lucy until we
All
get.
Hey,
Got big
I'm, I'm open all morning. I can stay here as long as I need to. So.
We never give Larissa a hard time, so. Good morning.
Yeah, no, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving me a little time this morning, and I will keep it brief. I was just going to touch on a few highlights from the memo that I included in your packet. As you all know, we typically break out our budget into two parts: the capital end of things with our kind of one-time historic preservation and interpretation projects, and then the operations side of things, which is really that heritage tourism program, the museums, tours, and also support of the work that Chris Ann does behind the scenes up at the archives. So I'll start with the capital budget, since really most of it went away and it's pretty straightforward. We felt like that was the area where we could really make the biggest impact financially at the outset of the pandemic. So we pretty much put everything on the shelf. We cut $1.2 million from capital, and that included really everything for 2020. We had, as you probably all remember, Milne Park planned, a big exhibit overhaul at the Welcome Center scheduled. And so put the brakes on those. We also stopped some rollover funds that we had available from prior years. So we retained $135,000 in capital, and that was really just for projects that were already underway that we wanted to wrap up, and to save some funds for some smaller capital projects that we felt like were pretty time sensitive. An example of that is some of the kind of basic stabilization work that we're trying to get done up at the Sally Barber mine site. So no new capital requests for 2021. We're just asking that we can continue to use any of those remaining funds that we kind of squirreled away, if you will, this year for some final small projects going into next year. So then looking to the operating side of things, we've been really operating almost business as usual with some obvious changes due to the health guidelines. Since mid-June, we've been open 7 days a week. Our staff have been really upbeat and positive. We've seen some huge numbers in September and October, which is probably no surprise. Yeah, we've also seen, it's interesting, you mentioned this sort of, you know, these sort of semi-permanent residents. We've seen a big uptick in folks who are kind of those remote learners and homeschoolers coming and doing their like local history lesson with BHA, which is just kind of an interesting result. Looking into 2021, we are requesting $526,000 in operating funds from the town. That's a 10% reduction from where we started last year. We manage about 10 owned town buildings, as well as the Barney Ford House Museum, which is owned by Saddle Rock Society. And a lot of the site costs at those facilities are pretty static, things like utilities and sewer, some basic routine maintenance and collections care. So that number is hard to drive down. Where we've made the kind of biggest impact on the operating side of things is one, liability insurance. We carry a pretty significant liability policy for an organization our size, and that's because of the construction projects we're usually taking on with that preservation work. And so a lot of that goes away. We've pretty much cut most of the marketing and event money we had set aside. The oral history program will be pretty limited next year. And then the other thing I should mention is we've gone from 4 full-time employees down to 3. We did bring on 1 part-time person to help, but I see a lot of savings over time and kind of reduced benefits and overhead kind of payroll costs. With the 10% cut, I'm still really confident that we can operate our core programs and tours and do a really great job in the community 7 days a week throughout the year. And if we're called upon to expand some of that winter outdoor programming, if there's demand, I feel really confident we can do that as well. So I will pause there. Thank you very much for your consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, gang, questions?
So Larissa, when you said your 10% cut, that doesn't include all that capital that you put back last year, right? Because wasn't that like 80% or something? Okay.
Yeah, we really try and separate out the capital and the operating because it's almost 2 different businesses under one roof. So yeah, the operating is specifically for just the day-to-day expenses. It doesn't, the capital is yeah, dramatically reduced.
What was the, refresh my memory on the capital reimbursement?
So we're not asking for any new capital this year, but we cut 1.2 million in 2020 for capital.
I get you. Okay.
And
That was milling.
Okay, that was a mill. All right. All right.
And Larissa, do you feel like, I guess just that staff morale is good? Because I know you guys have been sort of operating short-staffed, but still been very productive and busy. Do you feel like that's difficult on this? I mean, obviously it's difficult. Everybody's leaning in, but is this sustainable, I guess?
yeah, you know, honestly, Kelly, I feel like we've got the A team, and, you know, just like all of these businesses in town, we're working really hard, but I'm really happy with the staff we have. We all wear a lot of different hats.
You do.
We
Awesome.
do. All right, any other questions or comments, gang? Larissa, thanks for everything. You guys are doing a great job, and we really appreciate the cuts and everything that you're doing to keep things rolling. So thank you.
Thank you.
We like some of those local free things that we've done some gold panning and things this summer. I think that's awesome, and it's a great way. I mean, you know, 7 of us had never, my family and my parents had never been up to Lomax Mine, and so we went and spent some time up there and had a great time.
Good.
So thanks for doing it.
Of course.
He was part of the increase this summer.
That's right. All right. Let us move along to BCA.
All right, thank you, Mayor and council members. I'm very excited to make my very first presentation to the town council. Thank you. You always remember your first, so I appreciate you all giving me some time today. I thought it would be helpful to share also a couple of images, so forgive me for complicating things a little bit, but I'm going to share my screen a little bit as we just kind of talk through. I think it's helpful to understand BCA plans on how we're going to support the town in 2021. It's really helpful to look at some of our actions and some of the guiding priorities of 2020, because I think we all can see there's going to be a lot of 2021 is going to be a little bit more like 2020 than 2019. I think to say it simply. So I'm going to go ahead and share this with you. Bear with me. Oh, maybe it won't let me share. Uh-oh.
Leave it to BCA.
Yeah, you know, sometimes the first time can be awkward.
Yeah, tell me that. Let's see. see if I
Eric,
close.
Erin grimaced.
Bear
Could you
with me.
talk, could you talk to her about that?
No,
Grimaced, she grimaced. Okay.
Want to try again, Jeffrey? We have some, it seems like we have some time. Do you have a joke?
No, you know what? I've been really trying to reel it back because I don't want to offend anybody.
Good.
Yeah,
I
sure.
could talk about the first time.
Hey, no Jeffrey Tubin jokes either.
Bear with me. Chatting with Chris, trying to see why. Well, let me share PowerPoint. Hold on.
Ask him if he has a sketch pad. Well, while you're doing that, I will say that, here we are. Perfect. I will say I really enjoyed what was going on at the Riverwalk this summer. I went to a lot of those little pop-up concerts. It was very good.
Thank you. Thank you. And thanks for your patience. All right. So, like the town this year, Breck Create focused on resiliency. During this crisis, we prioritized our community of artists, residents, and visitors, the economic recovery of the town, and of course, financial stability to be able to maintain our mission in the short and in the long term. So to help us kind of guide through the pandemic, what we endeavored to do was really deepen community engagement. We looked at what's possible in this moment to really keep people connected through the arts. We wanted to strengthen our relationships. Thankfully, we found very willing partners in the town, the resident art companies and other local organizations. It was really important to stay nimble and responsive. So this season was and really continues to be one of constant reinvention. And then to plan and budget responsibly. I like to remind people that nonprofit is just a tax designation. Like we still have to run a smart business. And as a business, we made our difficult decisions and we tried to make them early. So we canceled programs, we cut costs across the board. We eliminated 3 full-time positions, left 1 full-time position vacant, reduced part-time hours, and carefully managed the reopening of our activities. So we planned conservatively, budgeting and including budgeting for an additional funding reduction from the town that thankfully did not come after a better than expected summer. So this has put BCA in a fortunate position of looking at a projected surplus, which is going to enable us to invest that in next year's programming and start the very beginning of a business reserve. This is something that was not done in the past at BCA, but the board and I are much more comfortable starting to work towards a modest reserve as just good business practice, which I think is our responsibility to the town and to our stakeholders. So looking at our programs this year, we determined what could be done modestly or virtually, and where did our programs and events demand a scale that just really wasn't yet safe. So in 2020, we primarily invested in digital and intimate art, developing new programs responsive to the community and to town needs. So this strategy allowed us to really align with some of the town priorities like the economic recovery, public health, social equity, and of course the environment, which are all reflected in our programs this year. As a result, BCA was pretty successful in pivoting, despite all the kind of constantly shifting landscape. So just a quick recap, in collaboration with the town and community partners, BCA supported Walkable Maine through 136 live free performances over 70 days on the Riverwalk lawn, in partnership with Breck Music, the National Repertory Orchestra, and the Breckenridge Heritage Alliance, and through 189 classes and workshops, date nights, arts demonstrations, and open studios on the Arts District. Combined, these activities across the creative corridor employed almost 60 local and performing artists during Walkable Maine. So thank you for leading that piece and being a catalyst for all of that work that happened through the summer and fall. Breck Create commissioned the Solidarity Street Mural, and that exhibit was timed to open the same day as the Breckenridge Solidarity Talk, where our muralist, Latasha Dunstan, was also a panelist. Working closely with the town's Public Works Department, BCA helped to bring the Bikeful Tower to Main Street, In partnership with the Summit Hope Art Project, BCA brought painted words of hope and strength to downtown Breck, and almost 80 Hope Heart banners lining Main Street. This summer saw the first Breck drive-in movie. Together with Breck Film, we piloted our first drive-in in June, and with the incredible response from residents, this led to an expanded summer series of free drive-in movies in July and August. This was in a format that was safe. It allowed people in our community to get out, sometimes for like the first time in months, and to still have a shared arts experience. Breck Create expanded online workshops and demonstrations. And in fact, in partnership with Summit High School faculty, BCA helped to present a student exhibition called Between Two Extremes that was 100% virtual. That was, I believe, our first virtual art exhibition. We adapted the Street Arts Festival to fit into a safer at home model, providing hundreds of free craft kits to families, created an at-home chalk art competition, and also did a virtual dance party for July 4th. We also brought back the music group Trio, crafted an alternate performance format in the Blue River to entertain and to educate, and we were able to do that in partnership with HC3. And this month, we're celebrating Dia de los Muertos through a new format that expands on community participation and self-guided arts experiences. This year, we're partnering with 20 local and regional businesses, nonprofits, and artists. So looking forward to the winter, we're going to continue to safely animate town facilities. We're ramping up our small group activities, and by November 1st, we'll have animation across the creative corridor at all but our 3 smallest and most restrictive facilities. At the Riverwalk Center, we are safely providing workshops, activities, arts education for all ages, including Wednesday after-school programs starting in November, and we anticipate winter collaborations with the Rec Center and BHA. And where possible, we're also working with the community partners that operate in and hold events in the Riverwalk to modify their events to safely operate under current guidelines. So looking ahead to next year, we'll focus on our year-round arts engagement that's flexible and adaptable to the public health situation. We will continue to work with our partners to support the economic recovery and public health in our community. And overall, we'll build on our successful 2020 programming. Based on what we're hearing from health professionals, it makes sense to plan for a public health situation that's pretty similar to today through at least the first half of the year. Where possible, we will replicate and expand what worked this season. That said, we do want to be able to plan and prepare for an easing of restrictions, particularly in the second half of the year, so that when it's appropriate, we're positioned to scale up and support residents in the town recovery. So the proposal you received lists 3 scenarios in response to the request from town leadership. In the spirit of being creative and flexible, I would actually like to offer a slightly different recommendation than what was proposed in that document. Based on the current concerns around our winter health and activities, we would respectfully request town council consider the community activation and animation scenario, which is that mid-level scenario in your document. And allow BCA the opportunity to come back to the council in early February to discuss the potential for a fall wave festival. And this comes based off a few assumptions. Based on our conversation with town and industry leaders, it seems like we're going to have a better understanding of the health and economic situation by the end of January. We're going to see how this works in December and January and see how we're managing at that point. Should it be feasible and appropriate to move forward with wave funding and planning, then I do believe that third scenario provides the best return on investment for the town. With Fall 2021 Wave Festival, the town could benefit from BCA's 2020 investment, where we're going to be trying to bring back some of those artists that we had hired and had to cancel, and then also reap the benefit of additional revenue driving activity. Historically, Wave returns about $500,000 to the town economy. So with this revised recommendation in mind, I'd like to outline just a couple highlights from the community activation and animation scenario. So this scenario allows for BCA to maintain town asset readiness and a staff essential for the use of facilities by BCA, the town, and our community partners and community members. It allows BCA to plan for year-round education activities and animation throughout the creative corridor. And enables BCA to ramp up on programming in the 3rd and 4th quarter when there's a higher probability of vaccine distribution. So this assumes a 22% reduction in town funding of almost $500,000. Combined funding request for all the legacy Breck Create programming, as well as legacy Breck music, and we were requested to kind of put that all together this year. That total amount comes to just under $1,796,000, which is described in a little bit more in your executive summary. And again, we're looking at that 22% reduction across the board for everybody. The good news is this scenario provides BCA with the staff and the resources to adapt activities and animation to best support the town. It builds on the successful socially distanced programming this year, like the drive-in and discovered arts experiences. And this scenario assumes more intimate arts and community programming throughout 2021. The challenge of this scenario is that due to the cost of facility maintenance, staffing, and readiness, these reductions fall primarily on the programmer budget. Most notable change is, of course, the absence of a Wave Festival or BIFA. Now, that does not mean that there would be no animation during these typical festival times, but I think we know 2021 is not going to look like business as usual. So what does this scenario mean for BCA? Is it allows for the resources and the lead time necessary for program planning, and it provides BCA with the ability to be responsive to our community, similar to what we've been able to do all this year. So thank you very much. I'm so grateful for your support and for the close partnership we have with the town. I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you, Matt. Questions for Matt? Don't be shy.
Matt, would you take off your screen so everybody can see everybody?
Thank you.
Aaron?
I have a question. I just have a comment or a preference as far as, and this might go without saying, but that the events are geared toward outdoors, safe, with this animation. I think, BCA has been such a great partner so far, but to continue to try to animate safe events outside, even as we head into winter, I think would be ideal. I know we've had short conversations earlier about how to create an outdoor atmosphere even in the winter, but that's just to underline it. But I think thank you for the presentation. I think it was great.
Thanks, Aaron. And we are working on some outdoor programming. I'm anticipating there'll be weekend outdoor activities and perhaps some workshops happening on the Riverwalk lawn where people will be able to come check in at the Riverwalk and then come out with snow sculpting and some artists come up with some really creative ideas. Also be in touch with open spaces. We have a proposal for an installation that we'd like to see if we can connect with one of the snowshoe trails so that people can, hike out and snowshoe out and discover an installation. So we've got some pieces in the works, as well as some indoor activities where we can do it safely.
Other questions or comments? Jeffrey?
Yes, if say we utilize the Riverwalk Center to a greater capacity than we have in years past, and I think that's a no-brainer. I think we're going to have to. What is that going to jack up the utility costs a lot? Is that an issue, or is that kind of a nominal expense? Like, say we call on the BCA to open the Riverwalk two times more than you did winters past. What's that going to do to utilities, and who eats that? The organization or the town in general, which is the same thing?
Well, I think it depends. If we're talking about additional sporadic events, we'll include certainly we'll include that in our utilities budget. Utilities are certainly not a small thing. It's one of our single largest expenses on the facility end. If we're talking about whole weeks that normally would be dark, I think we want to look at it on a case-by-case basis. But at this point, we are building everything into our assumptions for our utilities budget.
Yeah, what I was talking about more is like, there's been speculation, maybe sometime would open the Riverwalk and have food delivery or something that really wouldn't be a BCA event, but it would be a town ask to make the facility available. So I guess the onus would fall on if the town, that wouldn't come out of your budget, I'm guessing.
I think we would just want to look at it on a case-by-case basis. If there's something that we're partnering on, I think we definitely want to be a partner on it. At this point, we're looking at winter activities that can happen 5 days a week in the Riverwalk Center, but that doesn't necessarily mean 5 days all day. And so we are open to having conversations. and making sure that we have the appropriate resources and staffing to help whoever, we're partnering with.
Other questions, Carol?
I think the BCA has been a great partner through the pandemic and pivoting and holding these events that advance our values, from safety with the pandemic to social equity. So thank you. And then also I was looking at the numbers, and I know the BCA has been really good at cutting costs. No, sorry. So I'm seeing a surplus of almost 300,000, and I think it's a great practice in general to have reserves in the organization. But are you planning to reinvest any of those, that surplus, into next year's operating?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, the bulk, as I said, the bulk of that surplus, projected surplus, is really coming from the amount that we had budgeted for a second funding reduction from the town. I mean, that was $226,000 of it, right? So that was, again, just trying to be very proactive with our budgeting. And if you look at the document I sent you, there is an input of cash reserves in each of the 3 scenarios. So when you look at, grab it right here. When you look at the scenario that we're recommending, this community activity and animation, we're looking at almost $150,000 being rolled directly into program next year. And for context, the balance there it would be essentially less than a month's operating costs. So it's the beginnings of what we hope to build over time into a reserve. But with the uncertainty happening right now, it just feels like this is part of our responsibility to the town to make sure that we have sound business practice.
Other questions or comments? Matt,
The one thing I want to make sure everybody understands is, we typically, Breck Music has, it's kind of dissolved and now is part of Breck Create. Although they tend to still talk in separate terms, of that. And as part of that, we're no longer funding Breck Music through the town grant program, which was about, I don't know what the amount was, 80 grand or something like that. We pulled out of the town grant program and told Matt that needs to be part of his budget now. That, and some of those things were like helping to do backstop for the concerts. Well, we don't know if we'll have concerts or not. Hopefully we could have some at the end of next year. And part of that was typically 25 grand backstop, and then 25 grand to help with a concert promoter, which turned out to be really valuable for us in 2019 to have that relationship. And then there was just some other kind of marketing money that was earmarked that we would grant to Breck Music. So when keep that in mind, that when, there's 2 different numbers here when we decide what we're giving BCA, and one of them has to include money for Breck Music.
Thanks, Rick.
Yeah.
All right. Like I said to Lucy, this is obviously, Matt, a good time to pivot, make sure everything that we've been doing in the past is worth what we've been doing in the past, and not just, we do it because we've always done it. So it's a great time for every organization connected to this town to really think about who we want to be going forward. So I don't want anybody to really fall into this, well, we're going to do BIFA because we always do BIFA. Maybe it's time to never do BIFA again and to do something else. And I'm not picking on BIFA, but this is the time right now going forward to decide, what events really are the draw to the people that we want in town. What are the things that we really need to do? And then secondly, I just want to thank you for all the assistance you've given us, both with Walkable Maine, being on all the calls that you're on, great ideas, just for everything that we've been doing. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Anything else, gang? Okay. Thanks a lot, Matt. Yeah, go ahead, Dick.
I want to echo what you're saying, Eric. It's the can-do attitude and the willingness to partner has been awesome this summer. It's good to see BCA join in with town efforts as you did this summer. So I echo Eric's comments.
Thank you, Dick. That is a team effort. Our team has been working really hard this summer to constantly roll with the punches. So thanks for being good partners. And thanks again, everybody.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, we move on to reserved funds review.
So Eric, at some point before we are done today, you need to give us a number for BCA. So you want to do it now while it's fresh in your mind, or do you want to wait a while, ponder?
Well,
I don't know what you would
we need to-
ponder.
I mean, I guess everybody's okay with the BTO number to start.
Which one?
BTO.
Well, BTO,
yeah.
BHA. I mean, are we good with the BTO number?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, the BHA number?
Yes.
Okay, and then for BCA, we have, there's 3 different numbers. What is the will of the?
So right now, I'll just remind you, right now, we have 1.6 million plugged in. That's what is in everything that you saw last week right now.
So that's a little less than Matt's ask of,
Yeah, if you take Matt's asking for the middle, which is the community activity, which is 1.734, and then you add, and then 60,000 for Breck Music. So you're really at 1.796, I think is what he said.
1.8 is what it really is.
Yeah, and Eric, for me, the question is, how supportive, because I think that is the right scenario in my mind. And the question is, how do we feel about the reserve? How much help do we want to give BCA in setting up this reserve account? Do we roll all of that money into the 1.7 and save the funds, that we contribute, or do we allow some level of a reserve? I'm in favor of allowing some level of reserve. I'm not sure what that number is.
Well,
But,
especially since some of us have talked about eating into some of our own reserve,
Yeah.
town level for some of the projects we're doing. I mean, I think that's an excellent question. So what would your number be then?
And maybe 100,000 in the reserve, and the balance goes to reduce our number.
So that
That
would
would be the number I'm thinking to throw to the group.
fix.
And I have is my work with the BCA, Matt and I have had several discussions about doing a 3-year financial plan and really kind of change the thinking of the BCA. And Matt is very willing. And, I'm committed to continue working with him on that and really doing some long-term planning. So it's not always this, last minute ask of us every time we want to do something.
So Dick, let me get this.
Yeah.
You're saying 100 grand to reserves for them. That would bring that 1.8 ask down to 1.6.
Not quite, but yeah, it would bring it down. I need to get the final numbers.
Yeah,
it's
it's
pretty darn close. It would be pretty darn close. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it would almost work out if you left it the way it is right now at 1.6. It would almost work out exactly right. And they would be up to, then they'd have 1.8 to work with total for next year.
Okay.
I'd be good with that.
Yeah, I do. I agree with Dick. I want to support them putting some money into the reserves. I know that we are talking about going into the town's reserves in other areas, but this is Matt's first year in the budget hot seat, and I think he's making a really good decision and push to get them to have some reserves. That's just good business practice. And certainly from their, kind of holding money back from last year so that they could give us more money back. It seems like if they're taking a bunch of responsible actions, we want to support that, and the 1.7, I believe, is already 500,000 less than we've done in the past. And I know that's the kind of direction and will of council, but that's also a big step for this year. So I think we should be supportive of, or just acknowledge that. And their community, you know, Matt and I talked a lot. Of course, I'm always the one who's like needling on what are you going to do for the kids? What are you doing for education? How are you supporting the teachers? And they just really are going above and beyond. They have a really great, and they have big plans, I think, to continue expanding that. They have a really great woman who's running things at the campus. And I think she has a lot of cool ideas, and I want to support that. You know, we've been telling them for a long time, get that campus activated. And I know that that looks different this year, but they're taking some steps to do that. And I certainly don't want to pull the rug out from under that.
And I also support allowing them to come back in February, you know, and just, you know, we'll see what the playing field's like. But if we're hopeful in February, allow them to come back and make another ask. No promises, but just, you know, so Matt, because Matt needs to know that for planning purposes as well, if that opportunity exists or not.
Very good. Aaron?
So sorry, I need a little clarification because there was something there where I think, Eric, you said that it was $100,000 more. So we're saying that we would grant them 1.6 and then take 100,000 out of their reserve, or would they?
They have
Lost me where 1.7 wasn't really 1.7, I think.
They have $300,000 left over. The 1.7 ask is actually 1.8. It's 1.796. It's actually 1.8. So
okay.
Yeah, when you add in Breck Music, it becomes.
So that's where I'm a little stuck. I'm not seeing where.
So you take that $300,000 reserve, you let them keep 100,000 of that and put it into, you know, the bank. Take 200,000 and use it into that 1.8. That brings the 1.8 down to 1.6, which is the number that Rick had in the budget.
Okay.
I have a question about that.
Where is the number for Breck Music?
Look on page 9 in the packet.
In today's packet or last week's packet?
Yeah, today's packet.
For.
You see the.
It's in Granicus. Where is it in Granicus?
Oh, I don't know.
And then did the BCA account for adding some of those reserves into their operational expense? I don't think the 300,000 was carrying over. Didn't Matt say almost 150 would be applied to the community activation scenario?
Is Matt still on? Should we let him answer some of this?
Yeah, they were planning on using some of that for that.
He looks like he's on.
That's on.
You know, I would.
There he is. Matt, you want to take answer these guys' questions?
Sure. So what I think I heard the council say is if we took the segment about $100,000 out of the anticipated, and again, we're not the year end, so that's the anticipated surplus, that would leave us approximately 194 and 195,000 that we can roll into next year. So if we looked at the combined ask of Breck Create as well as the Breck Music, Legacy Breck Music funding, and we applied that amount, I think it comes out to 1.604, about say 1.605. And then then what we're doing is we're adding the 195 on top of that essentially to get us to our community activity and animation scenario that we're recommending. It still does allow us a little bit of a reserve. Again, this is the start. You know, it's not something that happens overnight, but I appreciate. I know you guys are thinking through this, but I do appreciate the consideration because I think that's valuable for us as a good business.
And
does that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay.
And don't forget that does give you the opportunity to come back in February, Matt, if we see that things are changing and you can do some, you know, sort of on the fly stuff, maybe some concerts or stuff later in the summer to do some activation or in the fall.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
You know,
everybody understand, Carol and Aaron, you guys.
So I'm sorry, I don't mean to be a pain. I'm just trying to figure out this. So are we saying the backstop income plus BRM grant or the like? I'm just trying to figure out the number on the spreadsheet that
is it.
It's
The
so it's
60
so it's BRM.
Yeah,
So
Breck Music Grant.
okay, and that's what is, and
So
I
we do,
the explanation for all of the other things has been great, and I'm all on board with what everybody's saying. I'm just curious about where is that, you know, in the past when we've given Breck Music money, it's gone to a big concert. So what's the plan for that money this year?
So, and this would be at some point I would love to bring Tamara as well, because she'll be able to give a lot more better historical context as well. But we are kind of planning, just like the other programming within the organization, we're planning for multiple scenarios right now. You know, for concert series, we're actually putting holds on the calendar through 2021 and already talking to 2022, because that's the schedule that the presenting music industry works on. A lot of emphasis right now is going to education, and so that's been historically a very core part of Breck Music programming, and it's something they're actually that they and we are working on right now. So it'll be looking at, you know, presenting music, bringing music to the community, and music education. It really is in line with our the mission and sort of past successes of Breck Music. Like everybody else, we're all just sort of adapting for the new reality.
Okay.
Matt, as far as that adapting, will this all remain flexible? I'm probably the most pessimistic of this group, or maybe not. I don't think next summer is going to be much different than this summer as far as our health concerns. I think we're going to have a buttload of people here that will be out trails and whatnot, walking down Main Street if we close it. But I honestly think that our health concerns are going to be similar this summer as they were last summer. I don't think there's going to be a magic panacea with a vaccine. Everyone's going to take it, and in large gatherings in close proximity will be healthy. So does this give you some flexibility if all of a sudden in March and April we say, well, things are changing, but they're changing slowly, and we're not going to spend this money on concerts or any gatherings that aren't socially distanced?
Yes, it definitely does. If anything, I think we have a lot of really good lessons to take away from this summer. And even if we find ourselves in essentially the same sort of public health situation, with the planning time and budget to some resources to support it, I think we can do what we did this summer, but better, frankly. This summer, I think all of the town and partners was very, very successful. But like Lucy said, we were building the bridge as we were walking over it, trying not to look down. And so giving us the resources and frankly some lead time to plan this based on what we already have learned, I think we can definitely have a successful summer townwide. But it's, and that's in the scenario that things aren't getting drastically better, that they're more or less the same. So if we have the ability to scale up more, then I think we're putting some resources to do that.
But if situations require you to scale down, you'd actually save that money.
Potentially, or what we would do is similar to this year, we would adapt. We still did a whole lot of programming, but we found new formats to do it that were safe. Or when the town was, say, July 4th, encouraging people not to be congregating downtown, we moved all of our activities to encourage home observation. Go be with your family at home and still be connected. So I think we can still do that, and the goal of next season is to be flexible enough to sort of roll with these bunches.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt. Any other questions?
I just want to underline that. Yeah, I think that money, since it was traditionally for a big concert, this year it would be great if it were reinvented or so that it's not just going to, oh, we're planning this concert and it's okay because we have this backstop. So if COVID has another wave or whatever, we're protected. I'd rather see Breck Music be proactive in that thinking. And if that
absolutely, and that fund is really a catalyst. That backstop it represents usually 4 or 5 times the expense ultimately to go to those concerts. This summer, Breck Music was very much part of all of that live performance, both in terms of planning and budget. So yeah, the organization-wide, we're going to be rolling with it.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Guys, we need to move on. We have a lot more to do. So any last really burning questions? Everybody's good with that number? Thumbs up? Okay, you got that, Rick?
Yeah.
All right, let's go to reserved and other funds.
Hello, all.
Hey, Brian.
All right, you can all see my screen.
Yep.
Great. All right, I was going to start by just going over the service funds presentation again, but Rick wouldn't let me, so we'll just
Good.
jump right into the service funds. I should say the reserve funds, like we talked about last week, we divide our funds into the two categories. You've got your service funds that we did last week, your general fund and all that. And that's the right side of the pie that we're looking at here on the screen. And the left side of the pie is what we'll be going over today. These are your reserve funds that we'll go through first. Those are funds like water, golf, affordable housing, and open space that have their own designated revenue sources that are legally restricted. So when we talk about using money for plowing the streets, that's not the money that's in the water fund. Those fees are legally required to be used for running the water fund. So with that in mind, we present those funds first, water, golf, housing, and open space. And we'll quickly get into, James and Errol and Lori Best and Scott and Ann are here to talk about what's going on in those funds. We have some brief notes down there at the bottom, but I'm sure you've all seen it. So why don't we start with the water fund? And James should be there, ready to go.
Yep.
To talk about what's happening in the water fund.
All right. Well, good morning, Mayor and Town Council. I'm here to provide a brief overview of your water utility fund. As Brian mentioned, this fund is a utility or a service fund, and it's paid for by the users, much like your electric bill or your electric service or your sanitation. Working through the columns, looking at the 2021 proposed budget versus the 2020 budget, and there isn't a big deviation in the numbers over the last number of years, with the exception of the plan investment fees. Your plan investment fees are for any new construction and for any renovations that require changes in how the water service is provided. The big variation that you see from the 2020 budget to the 2020 estimated for plan investment fees, that number for 2020 included a 2.03 or 145 SFEs for the Peak 8 project. And the difference, the remaining difference, was the PIF calculation of 1.5 for 2020. Water was one area that we did see a reduction in PIFs this year. It was not unlike what we saw in 2001 when there was an economic downturn. I think a lot of projects, initially were put on hold, even though that there is quite a bit of activity in the building community. We did see a downturn in PIFs collection this year. That number as of today is actually just north of 500,000. So there are some numbers or some dollars that are still coming in that will go against this year's actual budget. Water rents, just as a reminder, water rents, what you see there is the philosophy of the water division and the community has always been that the water rents pays for the operations. So all the services, some of the minor projects, and for all the water staff. The plan investment fees and the water service maintenance fee pay for capital projects. And so that's where a lot of the, whether it's the water treatment plant or the Goose Pasture Tarn plant or some water line replacements, those will be paid for out of those areas. Going through that, unless there's any other questions about those revenue numbers, maybe one just to point out the transfer from housing. That was a one-time add last year. The Water Task Force recommended to Town Council that we start to associate or apply a fee to affordable housing projects that would go into the water fund for future capital projects. So that 1.6 was a one-time injection. Going forward, that proposed 235 is a calculation on some of the affordable housing projects for next year. So I guess just to backtrack a little bit, that the philosophy is now to apply some fee to affordable housing going forward for capital projects. The other income includes dollars from water that we sell to the ski resort, and also for a partnership with projects on the Goose Pasture Tarn. So that's the projection number of 510 for next year. Moving into expenditures, what you see right there is there are some previously appropriated capital projects of 5.7 if you're looking at that bottom line. That includes the Goose Pasture Tarn Dam. Next year we'll do about $4 million of that project. That project is now estimated to be over $20 million, or probably on the ROM of order of magnitude of about $24 million at this time. And
Hey, James, where's the FEMA money?
the FEMA money is not showing up in this right now, and that's a good question. And the reason that it's not is because it's a cash in and cash out. It's a wash of dollars, basically. There's $10 million that we will receive from FEMA. So the first $10 million of spend on the Goose Pasture Tarn will basically just be a wash. We are showing it as an expense, but it's not showing, that full 10 million is not showing as a revenue at this point.
So out the door, James, what's the dam going to cost us?
I would say the kind of, again, going to the rough order of magnitude, we don't have a final hard bid contract signed right now, but it's probably going to be on the order of $24 to $25 million.
And now, is that subtracting the FEMA money, or will it be our out of pocket 14?
The latter, Jeffrey.
So it'll cost us 14 because
14 to 15 million.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
And then just as a kind of a, not to be a bearer of bad news, but over the next 10 years, the water division is anticipating about another $40 million in projects. Rehabilitation of the Gary Roberts plant, water line replacement. Probably an important thing to realize is this infrastructure is all approaching, surpass 50 years old in many cases. And so,
but James, is
Yes.
that what we already, why we raised the water rents this year?
the water,
Those ones we haven't considered yet.
that's a good question. The water rents did go up by 5% and the PIFs go up by 10% every year. And again, the philosophy of the water rents is that those dollars that are generated out of there are to be used for the general service expenditures, not the capital outlay, just the water staff and some of the operations of the water division itself. The capital side of the water fund comes out of plan investment fees and the water service maintenance fee. So anybody that joins into the system now and pays a plan investment fee, they're buying into a system that's fairly complete at this point. And so that's why, and the philosophy is that some of those fees are a little bit, go up every year because they're getting a more complete system. The water service maintenance fee is intended to, in the future, as PIFs are reduced and as we start to get closer to build out, water service maintenance fee will also, if council recalls, last year we increased that from $8 a billing cycle to $12 a billing cycle, or $72 a year for a water customer for one SFE. So go ahead, Rick.
Council, we have a water task force and it doesn't meet very often. Typically it gets together when we're looking at these big projects or getting check-ins. And this is we plan on getting that group together after the first of the year. We've got to really sit down and take a hard look at the 10 to 15 year pro forma of our utility fund here and see, based on these, we have spent a tremendous amount of money. When you look at what we're spent on the new water plant and then the Tarn, we're already getting close to what, 85, 90 million dollars. And then we look at other things down the road, and we've got to make sure that this is planned out over a period of time. And what does it do to our rates? And can we still afford to have that philosophy that James speaks about what water rents pays for? Because we know PIFs are declining, and that trend will probably continue for us. That's not going to be a major driver of revenue. And so, but on one hand, I think we still have low water rates for what we get compared to a lot of places. And I think you see why water rates tend to be higher, because there's a huge capital investment and cost to running water, the price of water out there. And so it takes a little higher fee in order to pay for that stuff. And so, I think right now we're setting where we need to set, but I think we have to take a really hard look with our task force at the future.
Hey, Rick and James, what's going on with the ski area water lease? When does that expire? And are those what we charging? Is that a fair market rate, or is that a bro deal?
Jeffrey, that's still a discussion to be had, but to answer the question, it's in 2025 that lease comes up, so it'll have to be renegotiated by 2025. And yeah, I'm sure that some of those numbers will change from what was originally done almost 20 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. We're still working on this Colorado Springs utility deal too, that could drive some additional costs. Not a lot, but some. But it could position us where we need to be positioned with some additional water rights well into the future. And so that, hopefully, maybe the first half of next year, James, right? We might have some answers for that. Who knows? We're getting closer.
Yeah, I think the deal points are all kind of getting pretty nailed down now, but it's now just a matter of putting it into some language. I would anticipate that project at the earliest would be 2022, that we would see if that kind of moves.
Yeah, isn't that far away anymore. Yeah. So,
I will remind us all that Records has some amazingly senior water rights, and it's expensive to administrate it with to deal with it because of the dam and the water plant. But still, I think that could be a future revenue source for us, because we have some amazing water rights, and the dam, the treatment plant is going to make those even more valuable, I think, or more able to be utilized.
And to that point, Jeffrey, I think it's important for the people in the audience to understand that even though Rick says we've been spending a ton of money, none of it has been wasted spent. Yeah. It's big projects like a water plant that was desperately needed, and a dam which is desperately needed. So they're big ticket items, but they are critical to the survival of our community. So it's not been frivolous spending on junkets. It's for real projects that are, it's not sending James to Hawaii or.
Well, we did all go to Blue River to look at the dam.
Yeah.
All right, James, what else do you have?
That's all I have, unless there's any other questions. Thank you.
Any other questions for James? Everybody understand this difference between water rents, PIFs, water service maintenance fee? Okay. James, thank you very much.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, there's some additional slides here on the water fund, but next, Errol Miller, guest of honor.
It's Swan Song.
Swan Song.
He told me this was always his favorite part of the job, so give him a big round of applause.
I bet he's gonna show up unshaven and like wearing a dirty T-shirt. He's out the door, foot out the door. Where is he? He stiffed us.
I'm trying. Can anybody hear me? I don't know why my video's not up. Can you hear me?
Hi, Errol.
You can.
I'm not sure why my camera's not working, but I'm here and I'm clean shaven and looking happy always.
Sure, I'll be the judge of that.
Yeah, the last budget for me. Wow. The golf fund, great shape. Let me just give you a quick recap of this season. maybe I can start there. Our rounds were off the charts this year. Golf is in a place that it's never been. Many of you have been around for a while and listened to me. Golf has its ups and downs, and over the past 10 years, we lost a lot of rounds in the industry, but COVID is a savior for golf, it seems like. Our resident rounds were up 11% this year. Guest rounds up 4%. Driving range usage up 26%. Those are huge numbers because we're already operating at almost capacity in the past year. So for us to get those numbers, virtually every day of the season was sold out every tee time. And so that allowed us to have a great revenue year. And maybe more importantly, I'm guesstimating we saw about 43,000 people come through here, and we were COVID free. And I tell you, that's with all the out-of-state plates and the melting pot that this place was. I think that's a big shout out to my staff and all the disinfecting and everything that went on here. We would have had even greater revenues this year, but we had to discount our greens fees because of the greens damage that we incurred last winter. Those discounts probably amounted to about $250,000. But that's what we needed to do to keep the guests happy and keep them successfully coming back here in the future. And I know based on the comments we got, even with the rough conditions at times, people were ecstatic to be playing the Breckenridge Golf Club. So with that said, I think we may be a little bit down in revenues from last year, but still to budget. We're going to be approximately about $185,000 over budget. And all told, at the end of the season, with Jim's savings in golf maintenance and the revenues and some savings that I have with labor, I think we're going to add about $600,000 for this year. So in a year where a lot of places are struggling, golf is in a great spot. We've always budgeted conservatively, and this budget for 2021 is the same. It's not like we're taking our banner years and saying, oh, we can do that again. We still know that wildfires, rain, snow, whatever could greatly decimate revenues. So we're still budgeting conservatively, not trying to hit those banner years. There are a few increases just due to some trends and a few increases to guest fees next year. But all in all, as you can tell, the golf fund is in great shape. Next year, we do have our cart replacement, which we've been putting aside $103,000 every year. So there's $412 in reserve for that. And our bids came in, and we've actually selected a provider, and the bid came in at $341. So we're going to save $60,000 in that area as well. So with that, questions?
Yeah.
So just so we clarify, the numbers that you're seeing in front of you are not the actuals, because they do these estimates a few months ago, and so Errol came in actually quite a bit above that in green fee revenues, and that he's telling. So.
Okay.
Jeffrey, you were going to ask a question?
Yeah. So Errol, the damage to the greens, is that something that we can prevent next summer so you don't have to do some discounts, and would that be something that we can invest in to keep that from happening again?
Jeffrey, putting surfaces, you wouldn't know since you've never come out and played the course, unfortunately, right?
Right. But you know what? I have a lot of friends that call me, and I think you know who he is.
Putting surfaces are king in golf. And if you don't have great putting surfaces, it's a blow to your facility. You can have bad tee boxes, you can have some rough fairways. In the 35 years that I've been here, this was a real anomaly of the ice damage that occurred on the putting surfaces. Last year's October snow, copious amounts, ended up melting in November because it got so warm into an ice layer. And even though maintenance tried to remove that ice layer last November, the damage had already been done. And we weren't the only people to experience it. So the short answer is that we're going to have some unique situations at 9,300 feet that we're going to have to deal with on any given year. Unfortunately, this year, the quantity made up for, the reduction in fees.
So it was Mother Nature, nothing that town could do as far as priming the pump, as far investing in a remedy.
That's my opinion. I think Jim Byers would absolutely
Okay.
tell you the same. A real anomaly.
All right.
So we, a few years back, we did invest in our maintenance costs, and there's some additional application that we pay for that they put on this time of year, closer winter, that help prevent mold, because the winter mold is another thing that can hurt the course conditions in the spring. And so I seem to recall as like at a $25,000 or $30,000 upcharge, we started paying to spray for that mold. Do you remember that, Errol? Wasn't there something like that?
Not only is the spraying going on, which the spraying was always done on the greens, but now it's being done on fairways as well to eliminate some of the impact on the fairways. But maintenance is also invested in covers so that when the greens do come out of the winter, if they need to be covered, that'll help jumpstart them. So we have invested some infrastructure and some yearly expense to help that situation. Once again, at 9,300 feet, we're just going to get hammered once every 35 years is the hope.
Other questions for Errol? All right, Errol, we're going to miss you. You've done an unbelievably great job of building just a world-class program. I mean, we cannot say enough about the job you've done for this community. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We're going to miss having you.
I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere.
All right, well, make sure you stop by and say hey.
Yeah, perfect.
You probably know you'll be paying retail for greens fees, just so you know, just to be clear.
So Errol is still working with us until January, and he will help transition. His replacement. We are in the process of interviewing the director of golf position, and we have it down to 5 kind of finalists right now that we're interviewing. And I just have to echo what Eric said. I mean, Errol has made money for this golf fund every year. He does an amazing job. One of my biggest regrets with what's going on with COVID is that we can't celebrate as staff and with council the accomplishments of some key individuals that have chosen to retire and spent many, many years working with this town. And it just really bothers me that we can't adequately celebrate those individuals. And so that's tough, but hopefully there'll be an opportunity at some point.
Thanks, Rick. And thanks, Errol.
Thank you all.
Good work. Good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Errol.
Thanks, Errol.
Okay, affordable housing.
Hello. Good morning, everybody. What I'm going to do is focus on the column to the right, which is the 2021 budget, and just go through that and make sure council understands what these items are, because sometimes this housing fund can be complicated. We're trying to simplify it, but want to make sure you understand both the expense side and the revenue side. So on the right side, kind of going down, rental income, that is our share of Huron Landing. It's also Coteau Flats, and it's also rental income associated with the dispersed units that the town owns. Below that, 2.8 in projected revenue would be the sale of all 9 buy downs. That might change a little bit since all of a sudden the buy downs are super popular, and some of that revenue might come in 2020. We actually have 3 buy downs under contract right now. So, and that just happened recently. So that money could shift a little bit into 2020. $6,000 mortgage payments. I think the council is probably familiar. We have a down payment assistance program for Town of Breck employees, where we provide down payment assistance in the tune of $25,000 to $35,000 and at 3% interest. And that $6,000 is the mortgage payments that we receive on that down payment assistance program. Rental payments, that's, we also have a rental assistance program for Town of BRAC employees where we would provide up to $2,500 towards their move-in costs associated with a rental, and that $3,000 is payments back on that. Our sales tax, we have two different sales tax. One is in perpetuity and one is going to expire in 2027. But that's our projection for sales tax revenue. Impact fee, also in perpetuity. I didn't change it much, but that is based on COs that we expect in 2021. Partner contribution, that's the county's share of our Huron Landing debt service. We did issue certificate of participations to fund the construction of Huron Landing, and the county is a 50-50 partner on that. So that's their share of covering the debt service. $120,000, that's our interest that we receive from Quorum on our $6 million loan to Pinewood 2. That is going to remain pretty consistent until that loan's paid off. The line item below is Pinewood. That has to do with Pinewood 1. And that represents, the land lease that they owe us and their loan payments. We also have a $1.4 million loan to Quorum for Pinewood 1. So that is basically the proposed revenues. I'll jump into expenses and then open it up to questions. But revenue personnel, that's about 2.5 FTEs. It's basically 95% of me, 100% of Nicole, and 50% of Corey. 60,000 is our, maintenance, repair of units, stuff like that. 1.3 million is Huron Land is housing help. Sorry, 1 million is allocated for housing helps in 2021. Also included in that 1.3 is we pay the housing authority perform certain services for us in terms of pre-qualification of buyers, resale calcs. So that's included in that 1.3. Also included there is the down payment assistance that we do for employees and the rental assistance that we do for employees. Under that, the 2.1 for capital outlay, that includes the 2 million that you approved recently for additional buy downs in 2021. It also includes our last payment on Berlin Placer. As you may recall, we agreed to pre-purchase 2 4-bedroom units up in Berlin Placer. The bulk of the payment was made in 2020, but we owe a final payment in 2021. 581 is our debt service on the COP, and as I mentioned above, the county shares in covering the cost of that debt service. The biggest line item, the $6.8 million, most of that is Alta Verde. We expect in 2021 to spend about 4.6 million on Alta Verde. The balance of that is a project at Public Works that we talked about, potentially $2 million. And then some tap fees to finalize our payment to the water fund in 2021. The Alta Verde, as you recall, altogether that project is about 6.4 million. 3.5 of that is going to be a loan. 2.2 of that is going to be infrastructure. And then we've got the $650,000 match for the net zero. It's spread out over 2020, 2021, and 2022. So that's the expenses. Then you get down there and there's some money that I cannot spend. So that is reserved. About 1.1 is reserved because we owe that COP, and it's a council policy that we reserve at least 2 years worth of debt service on loans that we owe. So I can't spend it. 9.4 is money that's actually owed to us primarily. That Pinewood 1 loan or Pinewood 2 loan of 6 million. I can't spend it, so we have to pull that out, reserve it. It also includes some value of some assets that are held for resale that also it's really money, but it's not money that I can spend. So by the time you get to the bottom, spendable fund balance of about 5.7 million moving forward. And if you have questions, I can take those, or we can look real quick at the pro forma to see how it looks over the next few years.
Excellent. Quick questions on this piece? Okay, pro forma.
So pro forma, next page, which I think is really important. You can see up Under 2022 starting fund balance, that 5.7 is that cash fund balance that I would have at the end of 2021. What of note in the pro forma is you will see that when we get out to 2027, that large sales tax goes away. That is generating about $2.8 million a year. That was a 10-year sales tax. So after 2027, that is no longer showing as a revenue. The other thing that I think is interesting about this is under expenses, I have included obviously Alta Verde. I've included a project for Town of Breck employees at Public Works. And then I've also included significant expenses for airport road improvements in sort of 22 and 22, 23-ish. So, but that's all we've included in terms of big expenses. And so you can see that the fund balance will continue to grow. And I assume we'll have some conversations about what projects to pursue but we do plan to continue buy downs and housing helps.
Lori, I need to clarify one thing. So on our 2021 proposed revenue, the 2.8 million sale of assets, that's for the sale of the units we currently own, right?
That's correct.
So we have not assumed any sale of the new $2 million worth.
No.
Okay. So that could be some additional revenues that would come in.
Oh yeah, I mean, there could be some additional revenue that comes in from definitely the additional buy downs that we acquire and try to sell. But there's some conversations about long-term ownership of Pinewood 1 and whether we pursue a deal to dispose of Pinewood 1, and that could create some additional revenue to the fund also. That would be significant.
Excellent. Questions on the pro forma? All right. Amazing job, Lori, to you and your crew. You guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
I think, I've just noticed an uptick since the new housing committee was assembled.
Thanks for helping Jeffrey out. That's really.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Great job. Open space. Hello, Scott.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see your faces this morning. I have before you the open space fund analysis for 2020 estimated and 2021 proposed. I'll quickly run through, well, as you know, the open space fund is largely funded through a dedicated sales tax, half-cent sales tax that began in 1996 and does not have a sunset provision. In general, 2020, the program has operated pretty much as typically planned. In a normal year, there were some staffing changes. We did have one full-time employee that was not, that position was frozen. We were expecting to hire that person in the spring. We did not hire 2 additional open space technician positions, which are seasonal positions, and we did not hire 1 naturalist position. So if you look at some of the expenditures for 2020, that's why a lot of those numbers are down. Those are some of the cuts that were implemented for 2020. So if you zoom into the revenue column of 2020 estimated, a couple things of note I would mention to you. One is that there's a $350,000 grants line item. That is the last installment of the River Park grant. We had 2 separate grants for River Park. So that $350,000 is not carried over, obviously, into 2021 because we no longer have funds coming from that grant. If you go down 2 lines to miscellaneous income, you see a rather large jump to $277,000. That is primarily because of the smuggler claims. So those were claims that we purchased as the town of Breckenridge and then conveyed a 50% interest to the county. So that's $245,000 of that 277 is that one purchase, kind of reimbursement for a purchase that we had done on our own and then split the cost with the county. If you now bump over to the revenues for 2021 proposed, the sales tax obviously is the big number there. That's an estimate that we typically go kind of rely on Brian and his team to come up with that number. Similarly, the $40,000 is carried forth. Those are TDRs. That's the sale of 1 TDR. That's essentially half of the price of 1 TDR is what that represents. That'll stay there. The Wellington Oro number, you can see at 124,000. That's largely from, we put a 1% increase in the reimbursement from the county. Once again, we front the cost on that expenses that we have there, and then bill the county for those costs. We are also working on the continued sale of zinc, which is one of the byproducts of that treatment plant. So we sell the products that we pull out of there as best we can. And so that's what that number reflects.
Hey, Scott, the revenue for 19, the sales, the 0.5%, was that, is that 3.5 or something? Did we get from the last year?
2019 actuals is 3.39.
Okay. So we're going to go from 3.39 projected to 2.626.
Well, again, that's the actuals for 2019 was 3.39.
Yep.
Budget, original budget for 2020. Yes, that's correct. We went down to 2.6. Yep.
All right.
Any other questions before I move to expenses?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so again, I pointed out that the wages and for 2020 estimated, so if you look at the open space programs line, the very top line of expenditures for 2020 estimated, the reason that number is down once again is reduction in wages, as I described earlier. Secondly, if you go to the second line there for debt service, this is the last payment that the open space program has to pay for the B&B purchase. So that debt payment is no longer on the books as of 2021, which is great news.
Nice.
And then if you look down at the next line there, transfers to other funds, that basically is some of the transfers for the grants that we had, again, for River Park, but also acquisitions primarily, those acquisitions that occurred prior to March when we essentially halted acquisitions for the rest of 2020. So that's what those numbers reflect. And then if you go over to the 2021 proposed for expenditures, once again, we are intending to, the 1.4 number really is, we have added back those seasonal positions that we discussed, being the open space technicians, of which we didn't hire 2 positions this year, and then 1 additional naturalist, which we didn't hire. We've also added, again, a 1% increase on forestry management. A lot of the forestry work that's been going on, I think, has been justified for some of the things that we're seeing in the Front Range. We continue to try to maintain and manage our forests in a way that protects the values, the open space values that we are, that we're trying to protect, but also protects the community with good wildland urban interface protections there. And then you can see for transfers to other funds, that is really solely only acquisitions. And so for 2021, we have budgeted $740,000 for acquisitions for 2021. So that's the majority. I guess I could scroll down to the very bottom lines there. The Wellington Oro replacement reserve, that is an amount that we put in to our Wellington Oro reserve so that when we have large expenditures for repairs on the water treatment plant, that we can have that money on hand. Similarly, the Hoosier Pass Bike Path Reserve, that actually, the idea is that we are actually not going to put the $100,000 into that. I think that number is in error. We were actually not going to add an additional $100,000 in 2021 in order to, once again, belt tighten with COVID and that kind of stuff. So that number should really stick at around $600,000, sorry, $500,000, because we didn't add any in 2020 or don't propose to add any in 2021 for the Hoosier Pass Bike Path Reserve. Once again, the county is kind of in charge of that project, and we haven't been able to get them started on that as a major project. So we're kind of holding off on that one at this time. Are there any questions with regard to the Open Space Fund?
Scott, what's the status on the Wellington Oro? I mean, this is something we had to do because of the EPA to acquire the B&B parcel, but I think isn't the kind of the consensus that it doesn't really do anything? It's like spitting into the wind, or and it's costing us $100K a year.
Yes, it does cost us a fair bit annually. It is succeeding in what it's designed to do. So the plant has gone through a number of upgrades and changes to increase its efficiency in operation, and it has been successful in doing what it was designed to do. The problem, Jeffrey, as we see it as staff, is that its design is functional, but it doesn't necessarily get at the major issue.
Right.
And there are broader sinks, there are broader sources and other sources of heavy metals that are getting into French Creek, which again affect aquatic life in there. And so we have worked with the EPA to optimize the operations of that plant, but can't really, without their permission, can't really change its focus until we kind of exhaust all options. And again, I think the data is showing us that although the plant is functioning well in its own way, it's not getting at the true cause of the heavy metal, inputs that go into that river.
Because there's only one small aspect of the heavy metals that go in. So even if it works at 100%, the others is not going to change the health of that creek.
That's correct. So we are in a long-term, goal in this to optimize the treatment, and then also continue to ask the EPA if there are other things we can do to make that. We've committed as a community, both the town and the county, to operating this plant in perpetuity. Obviously, we are willing to consider alternatives if there's a better way to do this. We have looked at those with BOSAC, and we'll continue to do so. But we are really in the first year, maybe first year and a half of really working through some of the optimization that they recommended that we do. So that is continuing and ongoing, but we'll keep revisiting that with the EPA.
Any other questions?
Hey, Scott, who's your past bike path? What year is that proposed?
So you'll be on an e-bike, Kuhn.
The thought there was that the county has a plan, has a kind of a feasibility plan for that rec path, but their priority at this time, as you probably know, is working on the Fremont Pass pathway work that they're doing over towards from Copper to Leadville. So that's their priority at this time. We set that bike path reserve aside so that we could have some seed money to help jumpstart that when the timing is right. The county does not have a date at which they believe they're going to begin construction on that. And so that's really just a way for us to incentivize or at least promote the idea that we would love to see that work happening. But there is no date currently set for that work.
Thank you.
I have a quick comment for council, considering Scott mentioned a couple of frozen positions. And as we go through the winter, we might see some areas of our town receiving a little extra use. And I would suggest to council that perhaps, up to Rick's discretion, of course, that we take a look or we relook at the frozen positions maybe in February to see how winter is going, to see if it might be a good idea to start reintroducing some of these frozen positions. I also think of the police department and how they might see some extra activity as well. So just putting that out there.
Yeah, I agree with you, Aaron. We talked about the same thing for the inspection group at community service. So I think everything's going to be in flux from now until who knows when. But I wouldn't count on a bike path, Dennis.
No.
Maybe during the Kelly Owens administration.
Oh yeah, things have changed then, man.
Anything else for Rick or for Scott? Not Rick, for Scott.
Eric, just to remind the council, we had talked about, I think that money that's set aside for Hoosier could better be served to get the back path right going through McCain, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree, Rick.
Especially as once we redo that river, if we put that, we come under that new, we create that new underpass coming under Coyne, and we put that bike path over closer along that river and then connect it up through, how we're looking at those projects out there. I think that would be a fantastic amenity for us.
I totally agree. All right, anything else for Scott? Scott, thanks. Fantastic job. You and your crew. Okay, we have internal and other service funds. Brian, I think you can cruise through these pretty quickly.
Yes, sir, I think we can. What we're going to talk about here are our internal service funds, which are the larger funds in this category of internal service / other. The purpose of those funds, your garage, IT, facilities, and your health benefits fund, are to smooth costs to, the best example really is, let's say, the police. They have a car, costs $50,000. You don't want to see your public safety budget, spiking up and down whenever they need a couple of patrol cars. So they pay into the internal service fund, the garage fund, a smooth amount, an allocation amount each year. So you get a better idea of what it really costs to run those programs. So big capital expenditures don't swing your operational budget to a large degree. So, well, those are the internal service, but we're going to run through the other funds first. The Conservation Trust Fund is a relatively small fund that receives our GOCO grant money every year, your Great Outdoors Colorado grant money, and the money, about 55 grand every year, you can see it varies a little bit, is transferred to the capital fund for use on qualified outdoor recreation capital projects. River Park, for example, used a lot of the GOCO money. Your next other fund is the Marijuana Fund. As council will recall, this fund is really used to fund a lot of intervention programs, Building Hope, for example, but with the nicotine money coming in now, we think we'll be able to move a lot of those expenditures over to the nicotine program. So this number here, this transfer to child care fund, hopefully will go up in the years ahead because some of the expenditures will be covered by the nicotine fund. So right now, as we did point out, it is set at 420 grand, sorry. But that's the money that goes to the child care fund to fund those programs. But as we know, that is not adequate to entirely fund the child care program going forward. And I'm just going to keep rolling through these. If you have a question, let me know. Cemetery fund. Helen did want me to tell you that the cemetery fund is killing it. Sorry, she said I had to say that. But the cemetery fund exists on burial fees and lot sales. And then the charges for services pertain to burials. And then there's also some charge from Public Works for maintaining the cemetery. And that's how that runs.
Do we
Just
get
so
an,
you
do we get an employee discount?
You have to ask Helen about that. I think there's I think you might be able to use your voucher for it. the employee
Okay, good.
appreciation
All
voucher.
right, all right,
Are
perfect.
you
Clerk's
going
office
soon,
offers
Jeffrey?
those, okay.
Jeffrey, are you
15 bucks off.
Yeah. That's for Ally.
Okay. That's the cemetery fund. Now we'll do the internal service funds. So like I was just talking about, here's your garage fund. This is the biggest of our internal service funds. It has all your heavy rolling stock from the buses to the motor graders and the plows, cop cars, all that kind of stuff. The relatively low acquisition year here in terms of capital for 2021. Your operation stays relatively flat. Operations includes things like fuel and the mechanics, tires, stuff like that. And then the capital outlay is for the cars, the vehicles. And sometimes the fund balance goes up. And then when you buy 3 buses in 1 year, it goes way down. So again, those are the kinds of ups and downs we try to keep in this fund and keep out of the programs that use the equipment. Your next is the IT fund, which collects revenue from every department, basically based on how many computers they have. So the more computers you have, the more you pay into the IT fund. The IT fund also has allocations for things like our network hardware and things like that. Considerations going forward for IT. For example, right now we are working with senior management to really see what our remote working protocols are going to be going forward. What's the best equipment to be prepared for whatever the heck the future is going to bring in terms of remote working and the stuff we're doing right now, cameras and all that kind of stuff. So we are looking at that for the IT fund. Facilities does the major stuff for our physical plant assets. It accounts for things like HVAC, roofs, carpet, stuff like that. Light bulbs and painting and things are actually taken care of out of the general fund. But the facilities fund, we all pay in a little bit. Some of us pay in a lot. For example, like the rec center pays in a lot to the facilities fund to keep it from falling into disrepair. Your last internal service fund is your health benefits fund. And this is basically, we are self-insured. So this is where all of the employee premiums come in as revenue. as well as a fixed allocation per FTE, which is now $14,000 per FTE. And that is what is allocated into, from every department, allocated into the health benefits fund to pay for our self-insured plan. When you're self-insured, as you see at the bottom, you pay your claims, that's the variable costs, and you pay your fixed costs, because even when you're self-insured, you still have to have administrators. We have a stop loss insurance policy for very large claims so that we're protected that way, but that's not cheap when you pay for that kind of stop loss coverage. There is a decision to be made here, sort of, for the health benefits fund. As you can see, the health benefits fund is running skinny. We're looking at a $21,000 balance at the end of 2020. There's a few factors involved there. The main one being, as you can see, our claims have been coming in high. We've had a couple of bad loss years in terms of our claims. We're trying to find creative ways to minimize the impacts of claims, but really it kind of is what it is. And the other piece that has influenced kind of this situation, where, as you can see, we basically have a zero fund balance at the end of 2021, was really timing. We started this fund in 2018. So this is your history going back, if you want to count 2021, that's kind of 4 years. But we've had a bad 4 years. And the intent of this fund was to kind of keep a bank. When you had a good year, your fund balance goes up a little. When you have a bad year, it goes down a little, but it kind of just rolls along like that. Well, we started it with a $600,000 fund balance. We kind of seeded it with the health reserve from the general fund, and we chewed through it. We chewed through it in 18, 19, and 20 in those 3 years. And then our projections in 2021 are kind of break even, but we're at this low level. If we had just started the fund in 2017, we had a year that we were 400,000 to the good. So it was kind of a Murphy's Law thing where, okay, we'll start this fund with 600 grand. It'll kind of tread water up and down and we can fine tune it. But of course, the second we started at 18, 19, and 20, just kind of took a downward turn on us. So I would like to recommend that, in working with our health committee, which is Rick and Shannon and Dana, a $250,000 transfer. And that will come from your service fund side of the pie. So that's going to come out of your excise fund, go into this reserved other fund side of it, in order to just kind of two things: shore up that fund balance to buy us a little time to make other changes to the plan to hopefully become more sustainable going forward. And it also reflects the fact that it's about 439 grand is actually in the general fund, excise fund, from that good year we had in 2017. It just kind of stayed there. So that is the decision point for council at this point.
All right, everybody. First questions about any of these?
Why wouldn't we transfer that whole 489,000 in?
That's a very good question, Kelly. You could. The reason I gave that number, we kind of landed on the 250,000, was we think that's a number that'll work. And also just being conscious of the belt tightening that's going on in other areas. We think we could get away with that, but there is a real logic to moving that whole amount over. So that's a very valid question and something for you guys to discuss. As far as the impact it would have on the service fund side of thing, on our reserves, that's really your operative question, is balancing the 439 coming out of there, because it still does come out of there, even though it sort of belongs to the health benefit fund. It still would reduce your discretionary fund balance to that extent. That's a very good question. 250. I thought it was the number you'd say yes to, but no, the 400, the 439 grand would have a logic to it, and also would not. I mean, it wouldn't have a tremendous impact on that net fund balance, as you'll recall, which is in the teens of millions.
Hey, Rick, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I don't want to do 400. I want to do the 250. We have to get a handle on what our true cost is. And, even though we've had what we say is 3 bad years, or we had one really bad year, right, in 2018 or something, but, I got to make sure we're budgeting correctly for these costs. And, now's not the time to tighten our belts. We know that with healthcare, but we committed. We've got to look, we're going to kind of get through 21, but we've got to look at what the future is. And is the future back at peak health? Maybe it is. If it's not, it's creating our own contractual relationships, because we have to start driving care to contracted services that reduce costs, and people that choose to go to more premium service would have to pay premium cost to do that. And that's the only way we're going to get this this cost in check, because you know it's growing on us at a big rate.
So there you go, gang. What do you think? Kelly, you are
I'm in for 250.
250. All right. Any questions on anything else in these reserved or the internal funds, the reserve fund? Brian, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Rick, COVID update, or Shannon?
Oh, we need to settle. Let's get rid of this screen share. So we got a mistake with BCA, right? It's never easy. Part of the problem with thinking that whole 300, and Carol was alluding to this in her question. I know she was earlier. Part of the problem with alluding to that whole 297,000 reserve is that some of that was already being counted for to cover operations. And so if we do the scenario as presented, trying to put 100,000 into into reserve and then use the balance applied towards the 1.6 to give them almost 1.8, is that they run into a deficit because their expenses still are greater than the revenues coming in. And so because some of that reserve was already being counted to be applied towards some expenses already. So you have a couple of choices here. If you really want to keep a reserve at close to 100,000, then it's going to take 1.74 from the town. Or, my recommendation might be that you would just do 1.7 to them and let that reserve come in at around 60 grand. It's not necessarily the best year to start all of a sudden building up, your reserve account. I think you can put some in there and then try to build on it maybe in future years when money's a little better.
I'm in agreement with that, Rick. I think that's the way to go. It's a start. I think that middle scenario is the right scenario for setting them up to be partners in the community.
How's everybody else feel about that?
Could you explain that again? So what are we giving them, more or less than we thought we were?
More.
Yeah, we're giving them 100,000 more because some of that reserve has already been accounted for in their operations towards their operations in 2021. So it wasn't all available to fill that gap like we thought we were going to do. So we really need to throw another 100 grand at it, which I understand. So and Dick and Kelly were involved in some of that budget stuff too. So I think that's probably the right thing to do.
Everybody all right with that?
I
Jeff?
support that.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Let me make a quick note here on something. Okay. Well, hey, thank you all for a great budget process. It actually, I think, worked fairly well going through it this way. And the format, whether we were in person, which hopefully next year we will be, the electronic format, did everybody feel like you got a good feeling of where we're setting budget wise, and not only with the revenues coming in, but how we spend our dollars also? Does everybody feel, because the main thing is, do you understand it? Do you feel comfortable with what we're doing and you didn't feel like you were shorted anywhere and the ability to dive into something more than what you wanted to, et cetera. So,
Rick, I really felt like there were some really good explanations from Brian and yourself.
yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of a happy medium, and I kind of liked it personally because I think staff got in there and said just enough, right, to give you an idea of what's going on in their particular department. So yeah, I appreciate that. Couple quick updates. I think that things are going to be evolving every day, right? We know that we're in a very tumultuous time right now with COVID and what's happening not only at the state level, but at the county level, and the counties in talking about everything from potentially lowering the personal gathering from 10 to 5, and what does that do? My guess is they're certainly probably going to roll back last call on alcohol starting this week, if not today, until the numbers get better to 10 p.m. And then they're really trying to target those activities that they think promote the higher risk. And that's the gathering of people and different things going on. They really like what we're doing with our police department and the business inspections that are occurring. And I know they've asked other communities if they would do something similar, and they're open to it, but they said they're short on staff in that. And I think Eric he's sending an email to the mayors to really try to push that even harder, to say, hey, can we all try to do something like this? This is really important. But that being said, we're moving forward with winter and the plans that we have for winter. One of those things is some outside venue. Currently, we have about, I think, around 10 different restaurants that are looking at putting up some sort of a tent type structure that has to meet code and do all of this in there. One of the things that we want to make sure you're aware of is there's also requests to add additional holiday type lighting around these tents, and especially around the entryways and walkways leading to these tents, which makes sense. And we're inclined to approve those, just, unless you have an issue, you want to tell us about it. But the interesting thing that's really coming up, and we have Chapin on here, he can address that. He was part of a webinar yesterday, I believe. Was it Chapin yesterday? Involving the Colorado Restaurant Association and the governor's office about winter operations with restaurants and outdoor structures. And from, what they like outdoor, but from what I understand, the CDPHE is recommending that at least 2 sides have to be open, which doesn't necessarily work as well here.
No.
That's a lot of heating that needs to go on in those. And the reason for that is the ventilation, because they assume that there will be heating, not only the ventilation for heating it, but the movement of air through the structure to make it safer for COVID. Now, Chapin, is that going to be a requirement or is that a recommendation? And how do we proceed with these applicants so far? I mean, I think it may become that it's not viable for a restaurant to even consider that if you're telling them that half of the thing has to be open out there.
Yeah, they put that out in their guidance document yesterday, the CDPHE. I did email Dan Hendershot. He was in the workshop yesterday with the state, with Governor Polis, just to ask him to confirm that everything that they pushed out in that document yesterday was accurate and applies to us. But yeah, the key takeaways from that document that they put out were that these tents or outdoor structures, and really we should be thinking about outdoor structures and not just tents, is that in order to be considered an outdoor space and therefore not be subject to like further the 50% capacity, for example, that we're in right now, Then the sides of the tent or structure, assuming it has a roof on it, you can have a maximum of 2 non-adjacent sides. So you can't have two sides coming to a corner. They have to be 2 non-adjacent sides in order for it to be considered an outdoor structure. If you're gonna have 4 sides, then you can have a maximum of 1 party in there for a restaurant, and you have to air it out. I don't know exactly. I mean, you get more information on how long it has to be aired out. Those are the 2 key takeaways from that document.
One party, no matter what the size is.
I'm sorry, Aaron, could you repeat that?
Chapin, it sounded like you said it was 1 party per structure inside the structure, but does it depend on what size it is?
That's to be considered outdoor. No, there's not a size limitation for that. So if you have 2 sides that are forming a corner, or you have 3 sides or 4 sides, then it's considered indoor, and therefore you're subject to the whatever level 2 or 3 status that you're at, whether it's 50% capacity or 25% capacity.
Okay, that's where I thought was the party bit.
And I know a lot, that's, the people that are planning to do yurts and that kind of thing, that's their intent, I believe, is that they're just going to use them for 1 party. And I haven't talked to everybody, but I know that's what some are planning.
That party size should fall in that, what is currently 10 people, but could possibly go to 5 people if we go to level 3. So I think that's the theoretical right now.
If the tables are distanced inside the tent, like the same as a restaurant?
It goes to the 50% first before the 6 foot, Kelly.
Okay.
And nobody was planning anything that huge, I don't think. Were they, Chapin? I mean, nobody was planning to do 5,000 square feet.
I think the biggest I've seen so far, and I think we've talked, maybe between 10 and 12 businesses, is the brewery, Breckenridge Brewery. They're looking to do a 900 and something square foot tent in the parking lot. But that's just for a waiting area and to serve drinks. It's not for seating.
2 sides open, that's like a wind tunnel up here.
It makes no sense, Dennis. I mean,
yeah, and then they're looking for that tunnel effect to create airflow. That's the main thing they want, is to have the movement of air.
And we have absolutely no stroke in changing this and saying, no, with this environment, that's just not feasible.
When I hear back from Dan Hendershot, I'll if there's anything that's pertinent, I'll forward it to Rick so he can disperse it to you guys. But as far as I understand, that's what all the counties are going to enforce.
Jeffrey, I think that's a no, because I mean, that's the governing body over food service licensing.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm not sure we'd want to, because what we don't want to, it's really about creating a safe environment. Typically an indoor space has some sort of air movement ventilation system. And when you have 4 sides in a tent with no air movement, it gets pretty stagnant. So, and I worry somebody would put up a tent and say, well, we'll keep 2 sides open, but on the cold days, we'd start to see some of those sides roll down out there. And so I think unless we hear differently, we'll be following up with these applicants, and they may not be proceeding with with this outdoor space. Some places, part of the presentation that Chapin saw, and I think maybe in the Front Range, people are looking at permanent to semi-permanent type, actually building wood structure. Looks almost like a lean-to, right? With, that's open kind of in the back and has 2 sides and open in the front to create, weather. And in Denver, that probably works pretty good for that. But, number one, our snow load would be requirements way different than what they would be in Denver. And so it'd have to be pretty beefy. And I just don't know too many businesses that have that type of space available where they would be building something. And I'm not sure that any of you would be considering it for anything permanent. where those would happen, it you know, be temporary. So I don't even know that any of that's viable for us.
I think we should just get a hold of the 12 applicants, tell them the bad news. This is coming from the CDPHE, and we just wait for further guidance. You know, if things change for the better, great. And if they don't, there's really not much we can do about it. So
The interesting statistic that they mentioned yesterday, Colorado Department of Public Health said that outdoor dining is 20 times safer than indoor dining in terms of COVID.
yeah, I'm not going to be advertising that. But I'm not.
Thanks, Chapin. That's really, the other thing is I was going to be signing a town manager order this week that allowed us to have outdoor structures in the historic district. You remember that is current code prohibits those for most of the stuff. And so I would have to do a town manager order to allow that. We'll see. My guess is we still may do the order, not knowing what's coming down the road, just so that it's in place, just so you have an awareness of that. But it would certainly have to be it would have to be an order that allowed for outdoor structures that met the state guidelines.
Yep.
Right. So.
Yeah. Dennis?
Shannon, can you, excuse me, update us on where we are with facilities or takeout orders? Has there been progress?
Pickup spots?
Pickup spots, thank you.
I don't have an update beyond that we had chosen the locations, and the resiliency group had kind of given a thumbs up to a sign design. But I can find out. I'll email everyone, let you know where we are with it.
Thank you.
Yep.
But we will have those going forward, if that's the question. We just, we got to finalize it, but they will be in place for this winter.
Gang, as you know, we're in a tough spot right now. I mean, the escalation in cases is some of the activity we're seeing is honestly pretty ridiculous. There are things going on that, you know, hopefully some of our enforcement efforts will help, but you know, the fatigue is bad. People are so wound up right now between the election and the pandemic that, you know, they're just starting to do stuff. They're just sick and tired of this. And I don't see an end to this for a while. So we're going to have to just try to keep pushing best practices and, you know, get the word out. Just keep telling people, do the right thing. You know, the 6 things that we keep talking about, keep doing those things. Wash your hands, socially distance, wear a mask. You know, we're working on some mask stuff with a little mask task force that we'll see again tomorrow. Make sure people are getting tested. I know that some people are talking about not getting tested because this way stuff doesn't get shut down. But you know what? It's got to be done. You know, getting people not to come to work when they're sick is a huge one. I know that's been part of this thing. So we, as the council, we need to keep pushing the right message out.
So we're going to pull back to 25% occupancy in our office space for town hall. I know the county's talking about implementing that from going back from 50% to 25% in offices. And, you know, I think we're trying to set an example and model that stuff. And we can still, for the most part, function the way we need to function. And we're not looking at, we will continue to see what comes out of the county and look at some of our organized classes, especially if they start to talk about group size, because we do some classes through the rec center with that 10 or less, you know, and socially distance, et cetera. But, you know, those are the things that we would drop down in size if we have to. The way we're operating the reservation system, the number of people that are allowed in the rec center, we think is working very well. We think that's a low risk activity right now. So we have no plans on modifying that. But, you know, we're continuing to examine those things, and we'll communicate with you on a daily basis what we hear. If something comes out from the county today on some stuff, we'll let you know. what that is.
Is that the timeline today is when they're supposed to?
I believe they're discussing it today. So this is all, to Scott Vargo's credit, he runs a lot of these things by the other town managers, just letting them know, here's what we're thinking. They're sitting back, brainstorming like we do, and they're saying, what the heck can we do to target high risk activity and help without coming in and just doing a full, step back across the board to everything. What are the things that we can do? And so they're just, they're throwing those out and they're going to talk about them.
Okay.
Hey, Rick, question, short-term rentals. So if someone calls the short-term rental hotline, who ends up responding to that?
Well, typically, if a complaint goes to the short-term rental, depending on the nature of the complaint, if it's something that probably needs an immediate police presence, they will make sure that the police are notified. But typically when somebody complains, like if too many cars are blocked or cars are illegally parked on the property, they call the monitoring company calls the responsible agent for the rental property, and they're required to fix it within 60 minutes, whatever the problem is.
Got it. Thank you.
And if they don't, then it's considered a violation that is then reported back to the town. So, you're going to be seeing some amended administrative rules coming to you shortly that allows us to consider multiple complaints, even though, so it doesn't do anything for the quality of life living of a full-time resident living next to a short-term rental if every weekend they have to call and complain because cars are illegally parked. Even if it's fixed in 60 minutes, the problem still happened, right?
Yeah,
The
that
noise
makes sense.
complaint, if it's noise complaint every weekend, the problem still happened. And if we keep getting repeated complaints at a property, even if they're followed up in a timely manner by the responsible agent, the fact is they're still violating rules, reportedly, right? We have to still prove a case, but we need to be able to address those repeat violations at a property. So, and we just have to encourage people, and we all hear from these people, that they have to call and report these things when they're happening. Don't tell you about it 2 days later. They have to call and report when they happen.
And just in case anyone's listening, 970-368-2044 is the number. Or Dennis, if it's too many over 10 people, they can also call dispatch non-emergency number, which is 668-8600. And if it's something of that nature, that's when Eric and I met with Amy yesterday, she really encouraged people to call that number, and they can call that number anonymously about any kind of violations. One of the things Amy really stressed yesterday, I thought was interesting, the 20 to 29-year-old age group is what's really spiking. And that's why, she's pushing for, moving the last call back, and why she appreciated the enforcement efforts that we're making, with our restaurant community, because that is the prime age group for our workforce in the service industry. So
Yep.
I really appreciate the PD being willing to get out and do that enforcement. I know that's not their favorite stuff to do. That's not who we are. We're not the heavy-handed group or PD, but I appreciate their willingness to try to get this thing under control. I know Esteban visited both my places and was awesome. He was great. So
It's more important than anything else we're doing right now.
Good to hear.
So
Thank you.
And the short-term rentals is something that we've got to get our arms around. Honestly, I don't think we've done a good job of addressing the 10 people rule unless they're from the same family.
Yeah.
And that, I'm sorry, but if you're renting your house to 12 people, I doubt all of those people live in the same household wherever they came from. And so I'm sure, I'll bet you that we have a ton of our rentals that are exceeding the personal gathering number of 10 with people from multiple households. And we haven't got a good handle. And honestly, I want to see if the county lowers that personal gathering number or not. If they keep it the same, we're going to get some better communication out to all of our short-term lodging places and communicate that. And then we need to look at maybe how we do some spot checks on that also for compliance.
Absolutely.
But Rick, if a VRBO sleeps, 15, which is not uncommon, it's just pretty much they can't function unless they go over that 10-person guideline. I mean,
You know what, Jeffrey? That is just how it has to be. Listen,
oh no, I agree. So I'm saying, how do we enforce that?
Well, we're going to have to figure out a way. I mean, every other business in town is running at half capacity and potentially going to 25% capacity. The short-term rental business can't operate any differently than everybody else's. We need to start enforcing this. We need to, inform them, communicate that information, and then start enforcing.
Yeah, I'm all for it.
And that's a good point about even if, and I know we say if you're part of the same family, you can all be together, but what they're seeing is a lot of the spread, it happens at these big family events. And as like Thanksgiving, Christmas is coming up, even though a lot of the country is saying, family size of, greater than 10 is okay. That might be something that we want to look at, because that's the chances that 10 people live in the same house. I mean, I don't mean to judge, but it seems very slim. So especially if they're coming to Breckenridge, it's likely that they're coming from they're not coming from the same town. So I think it's something that would be good to examine.
We need to get our handle on this. So
agreed.
We should cancel Thanksgiving like we did.
Oh, and Christmas. Hey, Scrooge. All right, we got anything else? Big man, is that it?
No, we got another special meeting a week from, no, we have a regular meeting on Tuesday. Pretty good agenda. Sorry, I'm just guessing, but we'll let you know in a couple of days. You'll see it come out, right? But I think we'll probably start around 4 o'clock based off of what I know. I always want to leave a little bit of time just for some COVID discussion in there. So that's my safety net. And then we're gonna have a special meeting on November the 3rd.
Yeah.
So the week after next will be.
Is that November? Is that November the 3rd meeting in person?
Nothing is in person. Everything is virtual.
Okay.
Unless you call this in person.
Yeah. Well,
Jeffrey, I think we had talked that you're actually getting a presentation from a developer, and I think we had looked at trying to do that in person, a month or half ago when we first talked about it, but it's just not.
Okay.
Not gonna happen.
Fine with me. Yeah.
Germ freak. All right, gang. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
What's left of it.
Great. Oh, hey, great job, everyone. Thank you.
All right. See you. Peace out.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.